Hello and welcome to Whistler, British Columbia for the third stop on the Viessmann Luge World Cup Tour. We've got the men's singles race this evening and it is going to be an event to be contested. We had a tight race earlier in the women's event and weather conditions made things a bit difficult. It's been warm here this week. Luckily it's not snowing for now, but you can see high humidity and warm ice is making it a bit interesting on this track. I'm Bree Schaff, pleased to be joined by Summer Britcher, two-time U.S. Olympian. Summer, tell us about your very recent experience racing on this track here this evening.
Well, as always, the Whistler track crew here, they're the best in the world. They put together a beautiful track conditions. I just finished my race earlier, and I did not have the best race. I actually finished last place, so not the best, but the track was wonderful conditions. Even in this warm weather, you could always count on Whistler to put a beautiful track together for race day.
We've got a POV coming up here from Tristan Walker, who co-hosted the women's race. This is headed into Curve 3. Summer, take it over.
So we see here Tristan coming through these top curves, building a lot of speed. The men's start is, I think, 4 curves higher than the women's start. So they have 4 more curves that they're building speed before they come in up here to Curve 7 where the track meets. They're dropping quite a bit, so very quickly getting up to speed. Coming into Curve 9 here, very crucial, same direction curve. Can be tricky. Curve 11 is like a 2-story drop, I think. Curve 12. It's so important to be relaxed and smooth in these curves. This is definitely a high-speed track, so any mistake is going to cost you. And here we are into the big finish curve, finishing right here.
And that is a long straightaway, a farther finish curve than most tracks. Here's a good look at our start list. This is reverse order from the Nations Cup yesterday, and then we'll get to the seeded group later. We're going to start with Italy's Lucas Guffler, slowest to fastest from Nations Cup. And your teammate Summer, Johnny Gustafsson, had a decent Nations Cup yesterday.
Went okay for him. I think he's definitely hoping to improve upon that today, as is everybody.
On into our final sled of the day. Last off, in slot number 32, we're going to have Jonas Mueller. This is a reflection of we have 2 different seated groups. But first off, Italy's Lucas Guffler.
Men's Luge Star. Well, welcome back. Hope you had a bit.
The crazy thing about Whistler is it's such a short track comparatively, especially for the men. They're used to a much longer track, longer time to build up speed and make gaps. So we're going to see a very close race today, I would guess. A lot of sleds in a small amount of time. And it's going to make it interesting for the second run.
Definitely had some unexpected events in the women's race, which typically, for such a short track for you guys, you know, running roughly 39 to 40 seconds.
That's right. If you make a mistake, there's not really time to fix it and pick back up time here. It's not a forgiving track when it comes to mistakes.
Guffler is going to set our pace here as he gets through the Gold Rush Trail on into the finish corner, Curve 16, 142 kilometers an hour.
And that looks like a pretty decent run for Lucas, so he'll probably be happy with that and hopefully improve upon his standing from the qualifying race yesterday.
50.46. It's always interesting to see the new faces that bubble up onto the World Cup Tour. Obviously a lot of change in the women's field, not so much in the men's field, except for down here in these lower ranks as athletes bubble on and off of the main race from the Nations Cup. Now, Summer, what are going to be our key points of contention for the men from that height? Have you taken runs from what was the old Damen start, now the new men's start?
I haven't, actually. I first came here to Whistler after they already switched the start heights, so I haven't actually slid from the current men's start. But I think some of the key spots we're going to see are 11 to 12, 14, 15, 16, and just the start itself. You need to have a fast start time to be competitive.
On the handles, the Ukraine, Hendry Menzi.
Start, Lucas Guffler.
And it does look like a bit of an awkward entry there into corner 3. It's just, of course, these tracks are built for the speed from the top.
That's right. It's something normally the men, well, men and the women have to deal with in luge is where the start ramp meets the track. And if it comes in at a difficult angle, it can be really tricky to smoothly make it through a start curve.
That was the cool thing about Calgary is you almost had an entirely half different track. Rest in peace, Calgary track.
No, I have hope. Calgary's coming back. I'm keeping hope alive on that one.
All right, a PSA to Hope. Keep hope alive. Ooh, as he goes late into corner 15 and onto the finish corner 16, Menzi is going to drop behind Italy's Lucas Guffler by 900ths of a second.
But even with those mistakes, 900ths is not a lot. He can definitely make that up in the second run. He's not happy. He knew he could do better, but this is Whistler. It's a close race always.
Now, Summer, do you think that coaches watched the conditions for the women's race and maybe made some adjustments here for the men's race?
It's definitely possible. People are always making adjustments, even for first run to second run, changing things. So,
how much of a hand do you guys have in that? Like, do you tell the coaches what you want, or I assume that it's a bit of a negotiation? Or
negotiation's a good word for it. I mean, I definitely have very strong opinions about what I want for my equipment and my sled, but I think it varies from athlete to athlete, nation to nation, coach to coach, how much play is in the athlete's hand and how much is in the coach's hands. We have Jakub Simonak up next. Jakub has a very fast start. I think he actually broke the start record in Lake Placid last 2 weekends ago and held on to it for a little bit.
7.02. The current start record is held by Johannes Ludwig at 6.93. Not ideal conditions, I suppose, for a start record tonight.
No, but Jakub's start was very fast. That's going to be one of the faster starts. He's having a pretty decent run here. He looks relaxed, smooth.
Track is in great condition despite uncharacteristically warm weather here. It is not ski season in Whistler. There is no snow on the hills, and that does make it tougher to maintain a track.
A little late there, but he handled it a little early to 13, high on the end. He's doing a very good job of minimizing his mistakes and making it look smooth, but they are going to cost him. How much is the question?
Simonak, oh, he drops! Loses that lead that he had most of his run. Now he's 8 thousandths behind the leader. Lucas Guffler of Italy still holding strong. It looks like the sled almost wipes off of corner 14 into 15. Is that how it feels as you're coming off the corner?
Not if you're doing it right. I mean, you want to be a little bit, you need to get early into curve 15. You need to get high on that curve early so you can manage to take the sled down and not have height on the end. If you have height on the end of curve 15, you're going to have a bad time. So you want to have
and
height
as a downtime.
A bad time and a bad time, that's right. But to get that kind of later peak in 14 and get up onto 15 early, sometimes it is going to be a little rough on the exit.
In the track, Anton Dukak from the Ukraine, currently in the lead by 300ths.
This is Colton Clark.
Oh, sorry, Colton Clark. Apologies. The young Canadian is making his World Cup debut, and I gapped it. Colton Clark, oh no, 200ths behind the pace set by Lucas Guffler of Italy.
And this is his first World Cup, I believe, World Cup debut. So he's
got no points so far this season.
So first World Cup, and it's got to be amazing to have your first World Cup at home. He's having a little bit of trouble. It might be some nerves.
He already handled the pressure of Nations Cup, but he's falling behind Guffler. Through and down, 200ths back, third position for the young Canadian.
And he had a few mistakes, nothing major, but I've got to think that might be a little bit of nerves. I mean, this is his home track. He's got so many runs here, but it's very intimidating racing in your first World Cup.
There's so many skills that you accumulate over the course of a career, and one of them, aside from racing as a skill, is home track racing.
Oh, look at that. So I think he was a little high on the end of the curve there. You saw his foot kind of come off the Kufin and into the air. And I wonder if that was him getting nervous and just anticipating the exit of the curve and kind of changing where his body was to try to fix it, but he would have been better off if he remained calm and stayed in position.
And now we have Anton Dukak of the Ukraine on the handles. 5th sled off the hill.
The men start. Boy, these names are familiar. Been working with these guys for a few years in some cases, for definitely for the past couple of weeks.
1300ths ahead.
Slayer 50.489. He'll be happy with that. Sneaking third.
And that is quite a lot to be ahead so early on the track. So we'll see if he's able to capitalize on that, build a good run, and maybe quite a lead. Already losing time.
He looks like he's been taking a lot of shortcuts, just skipping corners.
That's not always a good thing, though. You'd think, you know, shortest line is better, but it's all about being smooth and flowing. And if you're taking shortcuts, taking it too short, you might be cutting too much ice, driving too much. A big loop in curve 16 there, little tap out.
Ooh, 100th of a second behind. That's a 3rd place ranking for the first heat for Anton Dukak. Lucas Guffler showing what he's made of here in the first heat, climbing spots from where he landed in the Nations Cup. Obviously had a tough go there yesterday. And so much of this is about, especially in these lower ranks, is about building your confidence in your potential.
That's right. And there's some advantage to going early, too. I mean, you want to do well in Nations Cup, you want to qualify high, but if you make mistakes in Nations Cup and you're starting out sooner, you do have the advantage of the best ice. And there have been times where that has really paid off for athletes.
On the handles, Romania's Valentin Cretu. And that's something that's really interesting about Luge and the way your seeding system works, is allowing the lower seeded athletes the fresh ice and a chance to really make a statement here early in the race.
That's right. And it keeps it interesting. On a track like Whistler, again, the track crew here does an amazing job, so we don't see as much condition changes. Luckily, the weather is staying fairly consistent. It's not raining or snowing, and so they keep a fairly consistent track, but sometimes it really impacts the race.
Ooh, late in a corner 10 there, Cretu is using his 20 years of sliding experience to try and maintain a lead here.
A little late.
Oh, really high. Oh, no.
Now that mistake started back in curve 12, and it caught up to him. He didn't realize.
Have you guys had any crashes this week? Is that the first crash of the week?
No, there have been crashes. I mean, I crashed on the start in my
Sorry,
race a couple hours
I
ago,
apologize
so.
for bringing that up so soon. That was only moments ago that
It's
Summer
okay.
raced in the women's race earlier this evening.
No, we've had a few crashes. Here, see, bumps early there to curve 13. He's high on the end, and that just sends him over into 14. He rolled back to try to fix it late in, and he gets his height so late, and just there's nowhere to go from there but off your sled.
It was still, in a sense, 50-50 that got him. It just sent him into 14 with nowhere to go. Duncan Kennedy, former U.S. coach, taking care of the Romanians now. Tough break there for such an experienced athlete. And of course, everybody has to see a medic after the crash.
Well, it's good to see he's all right. It's definitely not how anyone wants to end the first half of the season going into Christmas break, but the good thing is that he's okay.
Tough break for Cretu as we take a short pause to make sure that everything is copacetic on the ice. Do they do that in Luge as well? Take a walk through to make sure that there aren't any pieces in the track? I guess you lose less pieces.
Do they do that in
Yeah.
Hopefully you lose less pieces. Normally, if the athlete says, you know, hey, I have all of my equipment, everything, they'll just
You guys
start pretty
have less
quickly.
carry-on luggage, I guess, than the other sliding sports.
Yeah, I mean, Bob's like to lose like 3 people, and you got to find them. You know. It's But sometimes athletes will lose a face shield, maybe a piece of tape, a broken kufen will take some more time to pick up those pieces. But for a simple crash with just a flip, you just got to make sure the athlete and the sled are out. And
simple crash, spoken only like a career luger can say so casually as we go back to the top of the hill for Mateusz Sokowicz from Poland.
To the men's luge start. Bad luck there for Cretu. All is well. Came off the sled though, unfortunately.
Fast start for Sokowicz.
7.04. Start record is a 6.93 set by Johannes Ludwig, who we will see later in this race. Ooh, he's got 1900s to work with over the young Italian.
That's a big lead. He looks very calm and relaxed in the sled. A little late to curve 10, but nice and early to 11. That was one of the smoother entrances to curve 13 we've seen.
2300s.
Beautiful transition. I mean, he is putting together quite a run.
That short break clearly didn't bother this Polish slider as he expands that lead to 0.3 of a second to take over from Lucas Guffler of Italy.
That was a beautiful run.
143.2 kilometers an hour. I understand that the speed trap doesn't necessarily mean as much as in luge. That's what Tristan Walker was saying earlier in the women's race, depending on how you cross that timing eye. Still, great speed and a great run.
Yeah, there's a pretty big split in our community of how much the speed is actually accurate and actually matters. And I think it's from track to track. You can see a difference in accuracy, but I think it's fairly accurate here.
On the handles from Australia, Alex Ferlazzo.
To the men's stuck down time for Sokowicz. Moved him in. Where did he end up there at first? Look at that with a 50.159. 7:04 start for Lazzo. Just off that 7:051.
He's looking very calm, very relaxed so far.
Now Ferlazzo is one of those athletes that battles in and out of that Nations Cup to qualify for these races.
That's right, he was happy to qualify this week. I know his goal is to try to make it into Sprint Cup, so hopefully if he really lays down 2 good runs, he can make it happen.
He finished 10th
a little late in the curve 12,
Nations Cup.
but handled it smooth.
Just 900s back.
A little late to 15. Oh, it's okay. It's going to cost him some time, but he handled that very well. We saw him go late into curve 15, which made his height later and just come out. And when you have 2 curves going in the same direction, you have to stay on the early side. You can't have that late pressure.
It is. You always take a breath when you see someone going late into corner 16, but Alex handled it very well. Even the replay got me.
He actually hit the wall there. He stayed so calm, so relaxed. He's fighting to catch those pressures and not loop the curve. We call it looping when you see an athlete go up and then down and then up again in a curve where they're meant to be taking a mostly straight line. And that costs a lot of time, so he's got some room to make up in the second run.
At the top of the hill, our second and last Canadian, Reed Watts.
I know Reed's excited to be racing here on home ice. He loves racing at home. Hopefully he can put together a good run.
Second place with a 53.83 Canada. Here we go. This is our one.
Is this where Reed started sliding? Was he one of the 2010 Olympic babies?
Olympic babies. Yeah, I believe he started sliding here.
It's amazing what the Olympics do to inspire next generation. 2002 was huge, hosting a home games for the U.S. and expanding the sliding sports.
Yeah, it's amazing, and the continued impact that these facilities have positively in the communities, keeping kids involved in sport, opening up so many opportunities. It's really great. So hopefully Calgary can make its way back into.
Watts has some work to do if he's going to catch Sokowicz.
It's a nice curve 16 there.
Ooh, laying back to the finish line, 800ths behind. That's a second place for Reed Watts after this first run. And the name of the game on a weekend where you have a Sprint Cup isn't just, you're not looking for a finish, just to finish on the singles race, but you're also looking towards that Sprint Cup.
That's right, the Sprint Cup counts for full World Cup points, and only the top 15 athletes will make it in. Ooh, see, I didn't see that originally. He slipped on his first paddle there. and he handled it well. He kept the sled straight, but it's going to cost him on time.
Yeah, 7.09 is a tough start there. At the top of the hill, our first Latvian sled, Riks Rozītis.
Canada's Reed Watts, one of our very own 50.248.
Quick settle there for Rozītis. Is he?
Riks is not known for his fast starts. He typically struggles on the start and starts out pretty far back from everybody else. But what's amazing is how high up he's able to finish with a slow start. He stays very calm on the sled, very relaxed, and we see him, I mean, really closing the gap.
Too.
Yeah, he's a big guy, but he is, look how calm he is. He doesn't have perfect position, but he's so relaxed on the sled. Late to curve 12 there.
That's a great description of the things that you can't see. The name of the game in luge is being as relaxed and as one with the possible. Oh, jeez. Late into 16.
He didn't go that late to have such a bad 16, so I wonder what happened there. I mean, we saw a lot of athletes go way later into curve 16 and they were able to catch the pressure, but he nearly hit woods there, so that is
Rozītis lost it in Thunderbird there.
So here we see him into curve 16, straight up to the woods, oof, and down, and that's a lot of time.
Do you think he just miscalculated how heavy that steer was going to need to be on softer ice?
I'm wondering if maybe it went well in training and he didn't have a bad exit of curve 15, so he wasn't prepared to handle that mistake. You know, sometimes if things go perfectly in training and you make a mistake in the race, you just don't know how to fix it.
You don't have that on race day, yeah. That's right. The dangers of being good in training as we go back to the top for Josef Ninnis.
That's why I always try to mess up in training.
It's interesting, though, from a sports psychology standpoint, because you can always talk yourself through those mistakes, because that is something to learn from every step of the way.
It's how you learn. And the ice is typically a little faster on race day, too, so things are always a little bit different.
Summer, do you guys try and mimic race day conditions when you're training?
Do you mean with the ice or
like I understand sometimes the Germans will do whatever it takes to really get their runners rocked and ready.
Right. I'm pretty lazy, honestly, so Josef is having a really nice run here.
Just nice 500s back, 144.4 kilometers an hour. Ninnis threw in down.
Oh, wow.
Ahead, takes the lead by 0.09 of a second. We have a new leader over Mateusz Sokowicz, Josef Ninnis, Slovakia.
And he is, again, also not really known for his start, but a fantastic slider.
One of the older men in the field.
If he's able to make it into the Sprint Cup tomorrow, I think we're going to see him put down an amazing race. But for me, I don't like to make my training too much like the race. I like to think of racing as completely different. I know a lot of athletes in different sports like to think of train like you race, but ultimately you can't make it the same, so why pretend?
Racing is a skill unto its own as we go back to the top for USA's Johnny Gustafsson.
Come on, Johnny! Dig!
Oh, no!
Ninnis under a great run there.
I guess Johnny just wanted to be like me. He still had a fast start with those mistakes. We're not going to see it so much in the first couple splits, but I think we're going to see him drop back a bit from that mistake on the start. I mean, it's
tough break for the American who finished 6th in the Nations Cup to qualify for this race.
I mean, the good thing is he knows he's got nothing to lose, so hopefully he'll just relax, lay it back.
Johnny trying to stretch it out and gain some time back. He's 0.2 behind. That's grown to 2,500ths.
Really putting his head back into curve 16 and
tough exit curve of 16 there, and Gustafsson drops to 10th position, just over 0.4 back.
Johnny's at just on this fourth paddle, or the settle, he lost his balance a little bit. And such a big skid when he tried to correct it. He was lucky to miss that wall. Not lucky, he was very skilled to miss that wall, but still, that's a big mistake. And
tough break for the 21-year-old American, who's coming off a 7th place finish in the Lake Placid sprint. As we go to our first Russian of the day, Alexander Gorbatsevich.
I really hope Gorbatsevich has a good race here. He broke his Kufin in the first run of the Lake Placid World Cup 2 weeks ago in like curve 7, and he was able to make it the rest of the way down the track without a Kufin.
Wow.
Missing, below the whole horn, that's the front part where we see a candy cane up, broke off high up on the track.
Is that like skiing on one ski?
Yeah, I mean, I was so impressed. It was really amazing. And then to add insult to injury, he was disqualified in the second run for hot runners. Understandable, they needed to fix his Kufin or get new equipment. So he had a rough time, but I mean, talk about impressive, making it the whole way down without Kufin.
That's the skill of a slider with 16 years experience. As he goes early into 50-50 there, gets it just under control. He's of course going to drop back behind the pace.
And we saw his experience with how he handled that. I mean, he made the same mistake we saw Valentin make earlier, but he was able to at least minimize the damage, stay on his sled. I mean, it cost him a lot of time, but we saw earlier that could be quite a bit worse.
Tough season for Gorbatsevich. Just talking about how he had a rough break in Lake Placid and then again struggling here on the Whistler track. We do have breaking news. You're going to see Alex Ferlazzo disappear from the start list there. He was disqualified for equipment.
Oh, no. We saw him bump early to curve 13, and he handled it well.
Our first German of the day, Moritz Bowman.
Moritz is a World Cup rookie here. It's his first year on World Cup. He's, like all the Germans, really trying to prove himself, make a name for himself. And
7.01 start. Just 19 years old. Bowman's raced both of the first races of the season, finishing 22nd in Eagles and 19th in Lake Placid. He's got some time to work with here. 1800ths ahead of this pace set by Ninnis.
Very nice 10 to 11 transition there. A little late to curve 12, but and the same mistake. So we saw Bowman make the same mistake that we saw Gorbatsevich make and Valentin make, where he went late to curve 12, which doesn't look so bad initially, but then it just sends them early to curve 13. I wonder if we're going to get a replay here. This is curve 15. Little late to curve 16, but we saw the mistake up in curve 13. Bumps early, high on the end, and then way too late, bad into 14.
Josef Ninnis is still your leader as we go to the top for our first Austrian of the day, Reinhard Egger. Now, Summer, I understand that Alex was DQ'd for Spalmatz. Spalmatz. Do you know what that is?
What, you don't know what Spalmatz is? No,
Is that like something
don't.
on his shirt? He had a spot?
I'm not sure. I have no idea what that is.
Something equipment related. A tough break for the Australian slider. These small nations are in a constant battle. Egger's 1300ths in the lead.
He's having a nice smooth run. He's a very experienced slider. He's a very laid-back attitude. He's always saying, it's just luge. So he takes that attitude and puts together a very calm demeanor on the sled.
That's what 21 years will do for you as he maintains that 1300th of a second lead.
And he was a little late to 16, but he just stayed smooth. He caught the pressure with his first steer.
Oh, loses it a little bit, but
almost
takes over from Josef Ninnis. And it really is amazing how that can help you find time. I'm sure in luge, especially like other sledding sports, trying too hard can slow you down. You tighten up.
Absolutely. I mean, I say you need to take your time with your run, which doesn't make sense to a lot of people. But if you're trying to rush and to be so fast and make it down the track, it somehow just makes you tense, and you gotta
don't be greedy.
Take your time, enjoy the run, and then you'll end up taking less time.
And this is a sport that seems to force athletes into being calm, cool, and collected, even in the face of a late entry to corner 16 Whistler, where you get punched in the face.
And there's a lot of pressure in that curve 16. It's kind of hard to see, but if you notice just the athletes kind of tensing up in that last curve, it's because it's such a tight angle of the curve that it forces more G-forces than anywhere else in the track.
On the handles, our second Austrian Olympic champion, David Glurscher.
David, I believe, won the Nations Cup. No, second in the Nations Cup.
The men's luge start. Egger, no trouble into first place there by a mile, 50.052 to 7:03 start. Great start here for the Austrian.
It's a competitive start time that keeps him in the mix.
It's been really interesting to see this Austrian program develop that depth that the German program has.
It is, and they have a very deep men's field right now, and they went about it a smart way last season. They had more than 5 competitive men, and rather than qualifying in the beginning and saying, okay, these 5 men will go, if you're not in that group, sorry, they kept a rotation going through the World Cups to develop more talent, develop more depth of field. It's a smart move on their part.
Hedge your bets, develop more athletes. Glurscher comes down in first place, 13 hundredths ahead of teammate Reinhard Egger. We have just one athlete remaining in the Nations Cup section before we head to the seeded group. Glurscher not that impressed with his run. It's always good to have some time to gain on the second heat. At the top of the hill, Latvia's Ines Kivlenieks.
Not yelling for a pass.
Now listen closely on this start. Turn that volume up. Disappointing silence from the Latvian coaches. It was a great misdirection from Latvia, who wants to keep everyone guessing on their approach to the start. Some uncharacteristic silence to keep us guessing. Kivlenieks makes his way down just behind the pace set by David Glurscher.
Well, maybe if his coach had yelled at the start like they normally do, he would have had a faster
Could
start.
have used a little help.
1, 2, 3.
On into curve 9.
A little late to curve 10, but handles it very smooth, nice early to 11.
Got some excited
Little
fans
late to
there
curve
down
12.
into Shiver.
And a little tiny bump on 13 that sent him high on the end, but he really minimized the damage there. Smooth into curve 16.
Great work through the Gold Rush Trail. He makes his way up the finish. 13 hundredths back. 50.058 finish time for the Latvian Ines Kivlenieks.
And the ice is quite a bit faster than what any of them saw in training or even in Nations Cup yesterday. Yesterday in Nations Cup, Ines went a 50.6. So he was 0.6 faster than his winning Nations Cup run yesterday.
The first of our seeded group, Germany's Sebastian Bley.
Okay.
24-year-old from Zuul that makes his home track Oberhof. Is currently ranked 17th overall.
Fast start time really puts him in a competitive spot.
He finished 8th in the season opener in Innsbruck, but 25th in that first race in Lake Placid. Sebastian Blais is one of those athletes that we've seen in and out of the World Cup as they make those German substitutions from a strong field of depth.
And that's why they have, ooh, little early at 13 again, the same mistake so many athletes are making. But it's really how they handle the mistake after they make it.
Blais hangs on.
Breaks into a skid.
Gets his way through the finish, 2/10 back. That puts him into 4th position. David Glerscher still your leader, followed by Reinhard Egger. Both Austrians in the top 2.
So we bumped early to 13. It drops down in the middle of the curve and high on the end.
Is that kind of a gamble there? Like, can you take that higher line in 14 as long as it drops you into 15? Or
Maybe.
would we just call that a mistake?
We're seeing some athletes handle it and some athletes not. So I think it just depends on how you're able to then make it around curve 14.
Yep, he didn't like 12 either.
Oh, it's Chris Masder's fiance Mara there, out here to support.
At the top of the track, Kevin Fischnauer of Italy.
Kevin's been having a very good season this year.
He has. He's currently ranked 10th. His top finish was 8th in the Lake Placid race.
To the men's luge start. Blais pulls himself into 4th position there with a 50.139. This is Kevin Fischnauer, a couple of Fischnauers. The two brother Italian sliders here. Brother Italian number 27.
Still behind the pace set by David Glerscher.
He's already a 10th back this high up on the track. We saw
clean lines. Would you call that equipment then?
I think it might be an equipment choice. Oh well, he's closing the gap.
Oh no! Early onto 50-50
Wow.
made things difficult.
But he went in so
Great
sideways,
save.
and by the exit, he already was completely back online again.
That's 19 years of experience for a 24-year-old athlete who has lived a life of luge. That does drop him way back in the standings, 9th place after the first heat for Kevin Fischnauer, who unfortunately now will likely not be getting into the Sprint Cup, and it hurts the overall points.
Anything could happen, but it is going to be tough. He's going to have to lay down a second run. See bumps early into a skid, very high on the end. Skidding hits the curve early, and then he's fine.
The track has done major work on that transition there from 12 to 13, and maybe it's a bit easy to be overconfident thinking that it wants to feed you.
Overconfident and not prepared for the change in the ice conditions. We saw with some of the the top Nations Cup athletes that qualified go 6/10 faster than their race times yesterday. And that's not even the top athletes in seeding.
To the top of the track for Russia's Maxim Erevin, dropping in.
Start. Fischnauer just being informed that they're cousins, not bros. Luge Men learn.
As you heard from the track commentator, cousins not bros for the Fischnauers. An important clarification, as oftentimes sliding sports are a family affair. Still in the red, nearly a quarter of a second back. Maxim Erevin chasing down David Glerscher of Austria.
It's quite a gap to make up. It's building. He's almost 3/10 of a second back. Nice transition, 12-13, one of the more smooth transitions we've seen.
Summer, how much do you hear in luge? Do you think that screamer in corner 13 is getting people?
You know, people hear different amounts of things. Depends on how you get into the zone, what zone you're in. I'll just usually catch like a little bit of sound going through a curve. Yeah, some people say they can hear a lot. Some people say they don't hear anything at all.
I mean, it is a bit of sensory overload as you're making your way down an icy hill. That's a 10th place finish in the first heat for Russia's Maxim Erevin. Generally controlled, generally slow for the Russian athlete. We are into our final 10 sleds of the first heat in men's World Cup luge here in Whistler, British Columbia. At the top of the track, USA's Chris Master.
And Chris is doing double duty here on the track. He's not only competing today in the men's singles World Cup, but he'll be competing tomorrow in the doubles World Cup. It's double training all week long, training from 2 different start heights on 2 different sleds, 2 different styles of sliding. I mean, it's very impressive.
Chris has gotten very good, very quickly at multitasking. He and his partner Jason Turnerman had a great breakout season as doubles team. 7.07 start for Master. His 17 years experience will certainly help him. The silver medalist from Saranac Lake had his best finish of the season so far in the Lake Placid sprint of 4th.
So he's a little far back, but we saw other athletes gain time on David later in the track. I think David had a really nice top section of the track. Chris is losing, but not that much. Really nice transition 11 to 12. Beautiful 12-13. A little high on the end of 13.
Nailing the Gold Rush Trail, but yep, still falling farther behind. 143 kilometers an hour for Chris Master as he crosses through and down in 6th position, 23 hundredths of a second back.
He's smiling. I don't think he's too happy with the time, but there wasn't really anything in the run. I think he's a little confused.
At this point, it might be a fight for that sprint cup to get into the sprint race. Summer, do you guys generally as a team pick a setup for a race, or is that highly individual?
It's individual, but we talk and we work together. So we know what everyone else is on. We help each other. Hey, I'm going to try this out. What are you going to try? Let's compare. Let's change. But ultimately, we usually end up on the same stuff, but it's an individual decision.
Speaking of transparency, Chris Master telling the world that he is going to sharpen up for the second run as we go back to the top for Max Langenhahn of Germany.
I mean, it's tough. We've got beautiful conditions here on the ice. It's not super cold, but there's not as much humidity. We had a snowy, rainy week. The U.S. team had training during the day, so kind of slower, grippier ice. And I think a lot of athletes are being thrown off by this harder, faster ice.
Snuck into 6th position with a 50.157.
Fast start time from Langenhahn.
Striking distance for number 2, German slider Max Langenhahn on the ice right now.
Only 20 years old. He's currently ranked 9th overall.
Already 400s behind David. That's very telling. David must have had an amazing first few curves of the track.
A little bit off the pace here, the German slider back through 29.78.
Sliding through Shiver on into corner 12 a little bit late. That puts him early onto 13.
Same mistakes. But I thought his curve 11 looked nice if he had just trusted on the exit and gotten over early to 12. Instead, we saw him fall back on his left shoulder to roll back, go late to 12, high on the end, and early to 13, like half the athletes we've seen.
It's amazing how easy it sounds trusting that corner, but if you've been bitten by that 12-13 transition, whew.
It's a lot easier sitting in this chair than when I'm sitting on the sled.
And it's amazing to me, too, in sliding sports, how much confidence does drive a sled.
So much, and even just almost accepting the doom, you know, sometimes. When you see the really good athletes,
you have more of your wits about you to manage it.
When really good athletes make a mistake, they stay calm and relaxed. They know the pain is coming. They know they're going to hit a wall and mess up, but they know that, you know, they'll be faster if they stay calm through that. And
like
other
a
athletes,
drunk driver relaxing into it.
That is a fantastic yet horrible comparison.
Max Langenhahn drops to 9th position just behind teammates Moritz Bowman as we go back to the top for Christers Apriots. impressive sound there.
It
on
was.
Booties
It was
on
good.
the ice.
Everyone has their little routine they do before a run, even if they don't realize it. Typically, an athlete does the exact same thing
Men's
every
luge
time.
start. Langenham, as my colleague said, in uncharacteristic ninth position.
Christer's just 100th
Up there in
behind the
top
pace,
leaderboard.
set by
This is,
David Blerscher.
Christer's Abriodes. There were
Summer,
Sam
what's
Mallon
your
in
pre-race focus?
Or
pre-run.
right before, like the foot tap.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you exactly because I just it's you know, it's like breathing. I just do it. But I think I tap my spikes. I think I slap my feet on the ice. Roll my shoulders. I'm sure if I watched my races, it'd be the same each time. But I could not tell you what I do.
So important to get yourself in the zone. Abriodes
Little high
behind the
there.
pace, 500s behind David Blerscher.
Little late to 16, but all right.
144.1 kilometers an hour. Second place for Latvia's Christer's Abriodes.
And David has quite a lead even there. 700s behind Christer's, came down behind David. He did have a few mistakes in his run. He smoothed them out so they were harder to see, but here he comes.
Christer's is currently
Little
12th
high
overall.
there. Oh, and this is actually his sister there. Oh. It's got to be so nerve-wracking to not only be watching your teammate and wanting them to succeed, but watching your sibling and wanting the best for them.
I slid with a sibling and I hated it.
Really?
I watched the races. It was awful.
Oh, I always ask people because I know I love my siblings, but I'm like, what would I actually think if I traveled the world with them competing? I don't know, you know? But a lot of athletes, they say they love it. Some hate it.
To the top of the hill for Austria's Nico Blerscher, looking to tackle David Blerscher.
Speaking of siblings,
Yeah.
not only, you know, traveling with a sibling in a different competition, but actually competing against your sibling. He's trying to beat his brother right now.
7:02 start. Here's a sub 7-second pull by Nico.
And I bet there's a special line of sports psychology, family psychology, sports psychology, all in one.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is some advantage to being a younger sibling and just having those older siblings in a sport to strive to beat them. You're trying to be at their level, which is a higher level than maybe your age, or I think it makes Nico a better athlete. I don't know how much it helps David.
Nico currently 500s ahead of his brother through Thunderbird. Taking a peek through the straightaway. Oh, and that peek might have cost him that 100th of a second.
Well, I don't know if you saw, he did something very interesting there. He split his feet. One went higher than the other, and it might have been that he was trying to stay off the wall, or it might have been to try to hit the finish ice sooner. Because
Tristan Walker mentioned that earlier.
If you don't quite know how high it is, if your feet are high, they might go over it, and then it's going to hit your kuffins and break the line, or if they're low, they're going to go under it. So he had 1 foot higher just to make sure he hit the... See, out of curve 16, he very intentionally changes. See, that's a big, he
That
was
looks like a
definitely trying to
cross-country
break.
ski finish.
That lunge,
Yep.
yeah, it's the same kind of idea. He's trying to just make sure it's not a ton of time, but this is a sport time to the 1,000th of a second, and that little bit of difference from the point of your toe to your kuffin, that could be the difference between being on the podium, off the podium, making it into sprint cup.
Might
not
have been
making it
200s
in.
back and not 100.
Yeah.
Fresh off the handles, Germany's Johannes Ludwig, the last German in the field for the first run.
At the top of the leaderboard, they mean business, that's for sure. 49.930, only 1/100th off.
Reigning
Johannes is
bronze
known.
medalist in singles and gold medalist in the 2018 relay.
That's right, and he's known for having a very fast start. I think he holds like
He does
half
have the
the
start record.
records in
Yep.
the world.
6.93 here. He did a 6.945.
And he's already a 10th ahead of the pace.
But having a tough season, he's currently ranked 13th overall. His best finish so far was 11th in the Lake Placid Sprint.
It is through corner 9.
A little high on the end, but he so calm with the exit. High on 14.
He's got
Nice
a
and
10th to
early
work with,
16. That was beautiful
143.8
transition.
kilometers an hour.
43.8 top speed.
Through and down your new leader by a 700th of a second. He lost a little bit of time. 49.848 is the new time to beat, set by Germany's Johannes Ludwig. Just 5 sleds remain here in the first heat of men's luge singles here in Whistler, British Columbia. The new pace has been set by Germany's Johannes Ludwig. Seven sleds, there's a back to the paper. We do have 32 sleds here tonight in men's singles. Summer, is that a prescribed amount, or is it a matter of the women's number difference and the men's is a matter of who is on tour?
It's a prescribed amount. So it's all, and here we have Tucker West next, my teammate. There's always 32 men in the World Cup, or 32 spots for men, 28 for women, 24 for doubles. So that's what we have the Nations Cup qualifying race for. In the men, I think the top 16 from top 17 from Nations Cup make it into the World Cup, and then you have the seeded group who are pre-qualified for the race.
Well, look at Ludwig. What a run there. Only 9 100s off the track.
And I believe Tucker has won a World Cup here, so he knows he has the speed.
Here's Tucker West.
Tucker West, 7.009 start.
He had a rough season last year, not making it onto the podium, a lot of close calls, and last week or 2 weeks ago in Lake Placid, he was able to make it back up on top of the podium, so he's feeling confident.
His sled has an interesting sound.
Yeah, some sleds are always louder than others, and some are quiet.
2 tenths back for Tucker West as he goes late into curve 12 and early on the 13th.
High on the end. Nice transition, 15 to 16.
Tucker West is going to finish his first run.
Tucker West through and down in 7th position, just over 2 tenths back behind the new leader, Johannes Ludwig of Germany. That puts Tucker 3 positions ahead of teammate Chris Mazder, who is currently in 10th place.
Here we see him coming into curve 12 a little late. And it looks like he's fighting to get the curve down then, and just early to 13, low in the middle, high on the end.
That's a tough place. I mean, the cool thing about Whistler is it gets technical at top speed. And
Absolutely.
that's where it is high risk and you have to be on your game.
Everyone. Is it still on me?
Yes, it is, Tucker. Yes, it is.
At the top of the hill, Dominic Fischnaller of Italy.
Go to the men's luge start.
Is he having trouble getting his hands in there? Did you see that?
It looked like it took him longer. I don't know if that was him having trouble or just a different technique. Different athletes settle in different ways, so that some people don't actually put their hands in the sled until they're actually in the first curve.
Dominic currently behind the pace by 1,400 set by Johannes Ludwig. Summer, I've been wondering this. As you're trying to put your hands into your sled, do you snag your suit? Do the spikes on your fingers get caught up on your suit at all?
Sometimes, but typically no. Some athletes, when they settle, they grab their handles first and then lay down, so they don't risk that. But the athletes that lay down and then work their hands in, you kind of almost have to go spikes out and then turn your hands around.
Dominic Fischnaller threw it down with a 49.959. That's just over a tenth behind Johannes Ludwig.
And honestly, these are bigger gaps than I was expecting to see. I was expecting a lot closer of a cluster of athletes in the top 10, but we have to 10th place a 3-second gap, and Josef Nina's holding into 10th place there.
Especially now that Whistler is a shorter track, it is interesting to see this gap here.
I think what it comes down to is the changing ice conditions and how many athletes we saw make mistakes 12-13.
This is far more mistakes than we saw in Training Nations Cup and the seeded group yesterday.
And they're not huge mistakes, but on a shorter track, that time really costs you.
Fortunately, we have an expert here, Summer Britcher, joining the broadcast to help explain what those little differences are between 100th and the top time. At the top of the hill, Russia's Semyon Pavlichenko.
Pavlichenko is always a fun athlete to watch because he, I guess the only way to describe it is fully sends it every time.
Sends it.
He sends it. There's no other way. I mean,
fly or die. I've heard.
Yeah, fly or die. I mean, he, even if he's having a horrible mistake, he just throws his head back and trusts that he'll fix it. And sometimes it's amazing, and sometimes it really costs him. And it would be better to just take a peek and see where he's going. But he doesn't do that. He goes for it full out every time.
That's a great example of steering with confidence. 900s back for Pavlichenko as he makes his way into Shiver and into the Gold Rush Trail.
He bumped a little bit, but his nice position really minimized it. High there, nice 15-16 transition.
Amazing for someone that is
Where's his
tucked
head?
back, not looking. He really managed. I mean, what other athletes we saw going too early onto those corners, it really started sending them offline. But Pavlichenko comes down in second place, just 500ths behind Johannes Ludwig.
And if you really pay attention to some athletes like upper bodies, they stay relaxed, they absorb those bumps. And an athlete who's nervous or tense, they get stiff, and that's when we see it send them deep into the curve and high on the end. But he is very relaxed. Such good position. His head is back. He's calm.
How much of an aerodynamic advantage is that when you do the wind tunnel testing, Summer?
So the interesting thing, actually, we found is that it's better to just keep your head in the same spot, which he does. He keeps it out of sight. But some athletes, they keep it back, but they keep peaking.
Consistency.
But it would be better to just keep it a little bit higher in the same spot than think, oh, my head's back, I'm good. No, I got to look. Oh, now my head's back, I have good position. It's consistency. You want to look like you're not doing anything on the sled. You want your body to look the same and not show those steers, those corrections, those adjustments.
4 sleds remain. Wolfgang Kindl of Austria on the start, barely missing that left wall.
Almost got his elbow on there. Pretty far back already.
Kindl's start was a 7.08.
Wow. I think there must have been a bigger mistake up there than we realized. It's already almost 3/10 back.
Kindl took 5th on his home track in the Eagles in the season opener. Really working hard to get there onto 12.
A little late to curve 16.
Kindl manages that big rise expertly, but not fast. Over 3/10 back for Wolfgang. That puts him in 14th place, just behind Sokowicz of Poland.
I mean, right now he's at risk of being on that edge of making it a sprint cup, and this is crazy to see. I mean, he's one of the best athletes in the world, coming down in 14th place. He's got to be.
He's 7th overall, and if he misses that sprint cup, it's really tough to make your way back into the standings there. Summer, anything you can pick out here that's 3/10 of a difference between him and Johannes Ludwig?
I mean, his run was a little high there on 13. He's like a little late to 16. But the thing is, he was really far back from the start. I mean, we saw on the start he was like a 10th back. And by the second split, already 2/10. So I think that mistake we saw him make going late into start curve at a sharp angle, I think it just cost him the whole way down. His run didn't look too bad.
Last 3 sleds of the first heat on the handles, Roman Repelov of Russia.
Now, Roman actually did not get to compete here last year. He was held up in customs, a problem with his visa, so he, I think, got here like the day of the race and had to just hang out and support his teammates.
Brutal.
Yeah,
Repelov
brutal.
currently 2nd overall. He won the Lake Placid Sprint.
He still, I think, without racing last year, Whistler finished 2nd overall, I think. So, or he would have finished pretty high up overall.
And definitely one of the things you don't see on the ice is the amount of logistics that go into racing, and the team managers that have to anticipate visas, make sure that passports have enough clearance in order to make sure that the athletes won't get held up at customs.
Absolutely.
Make sure there's no felonies on record.
He's having a nice run, a little off here and there.
145 kilometers an hour. Repelov through and down, just 200s back. Currently 2nd place, the first athlete to knock Semen Pavlichenko down into third. We now have a Germany-Russia-Russia race. David Glerscher, who held the lead for a while, is now in fourth place, followed by brother Nico Glerscher in fifth. Great run there for Roman. He's looking to continue that momentum from Lake Placid. Speaking of momentum, someone looking for momentum is the great Felix Locke of Germany on the handles.
Yeah, Felix seems to have had a tough season so far.
And not unlike last season, it was a bit of a slow start last year as well. Quick settle for Felix Locke.
49.874. But if you know anything about luge,
Almost 600s back on the start.
Felix Locke has won everything there is to win in his career so far. 7:00
Skipping quarter 5 and on into 6. Felix is still currently behind the pace, 1100s back from teammate Johannes Ludwig.
21.11 first.
And Felix has a different sliding technique than anybody else. It works for him, obviously, but if you watch his head, he's what we call rolling it up most curves, and it's weird because it's the opposite of what everyone else is trying to do.
Is that like an upsteer?
I have no idea, but I mean...
Locke threw it down, just 500s back. That's third place after the first heat for Felix Locke. One sled remaining.
He's an Olympic gold medalist, so I guess his head rolling up the curve works for him, but that's something that if anyone else does it, we say that's bad position. So.
And why is that bad position? What do you mean by rolling up?
Well,
the
you
curve?
want to be. His head is turned.
Like looking up?
Looking almost up the curve, and you want to have it actually down the curve with the curve.
For aerodynamics.
Aerodynamics kind of smoothly steers it with it, but he actually. His head almost stays the same, and the curves in the rest of his body just moves around him.
Almost like a rudder on a boat, just the opposite of what you would think is counter steering.
Schuhe dann, aber ich muss zum Biegen.
One sled remains. The man to beat this season so far, Johannes Müller of Austria.
The World Cup leader.
Johannes has taken home 2 wins already this season.
This is the Viessmann World Cup, and this is the World Cup leader, Johannes Müller.
And that is a surprising rarity in this field. It is not a big list of World Cup winners in luge, since you so often have the same people dominating the sport. Johannes having a breakout season here. Currently 1400s back in the final sled of the first heat.
He's having a very smooth run. We've seen a lot of the recent athletes have a pretty big gap at the top there. So right now he's just going to try to stop the bleeding, not let it get too far away from him to try to be in a good spot for the second round.
Tough draw on warm ice. The last sled up the hill, late into 16.
Very late into curve 16, a big loop. That's going to cost him.
Well managed, but he comes down over 2/10 behind. That's a 12th place first run for Johannes Müller, the current World Cup leader. Johannes, like so many, lost it towards the end of the track there.
Late to curve 15, high on the end, which puts him right on that wall there where you do not want to be. So much pressure then coming into curve 16. It's already a high pressure curve, but when you don't get in with a good entrance, it kind of rocks you.
And we're seeing a lot of lines written into the ice, which is a sign, I'm sure, of the temperatures as well as people steering and trying to manage those mistakes. Not the first run that Johannes Müller was looking for. Your standings after the first heat. Germany's Johannes Ludwig in the lead just 200s ahead of Russia's Roman Repelov, followed by Olympic champion Felix Locke in third, Simon Pavlichenko fourth, David Glerscher and Nico Glerscher fifth and sixth to round out the top six. Dominic Fischnaller of Italy knocking on the door there, just 300ths back from the top six there. Tucker West, the top American, in 11th, Chris Master in 15th. We have 32 sleds in the field. Every sled will get a second run as we do reverse order, slowest to first. Hometown hero Reed Watts, born and raised on the 2010 Olympic track here, currently in 20th. He'll be looking to gain some time. And Johnny Gustafson of the U.S. with that unfortunate start there, putting him in 30th. Welcome back to the second heat of stop number 3 on the Viessmann Luge World Cup Tour. We are here in Whistler, British Columbia. And man, was it a first heat to remember. We saw a lot of action, surprisingly, for a shorter track. Conditions here tonight, it's getting chillier, but the ice actually warmed up when we first started. I believe it was a 1.5 degrees, so the ice is warming up a little. Maybe they've turned the refrigeration off. Either way, I'm Bree Schaaf, pleased to be joined by two-time Olympian Summer Britcher. Summer, that first run, top 3, talk us through it.
Well, we have a pretty standard top 3 here. These 3 are definitely not strangers to being in this position. We have Johannes Ludwig, Roman Repelov, and Felix Locke. All incredible athletes. They've all won races before. Felix Locke's an Olympic gold medalist, and they're sitting. Yeah, here we have Felix Locke here in 3rd place. He actually has not been on the podium yet this season. So he's looking to get his first podium of the year. Roman Repelov racing here for the first time in 2 years. And he's only 200ths behind our current leader, Johannes Ludwig, who started out in 1st place and held 1st place splits all the way down.
Ludwig is the man to beat here. Take a look at our start list. We go from reversed order, slowest to fastest. Unfortunately, Summer's teammate Johnny Gustafson had a tough first run there. He has a chance for redemption as we look towards then Canadian Reed Watts, the hometown hero. He will be 11th off, followed by American Chris Master, Tucker West in 20th. 30 sleds. We did have 2 sleds disqualified. We have a DNF from Romania and then a DSQ. That's a disqualification for the Australian Alex Verlazzo, unfortunately.
Do it, Johnny.
All right, so Johnny made a huge mistake his first run on the start. So he is really just trying to lay down a good second run. He knows his racing weekend's over, so he just wants to end it on a good one to have that confidence going into Christmas break.
To the men's luge start.
Much better than his first
Get a
run.
chance to get a little bit warmer and get your shout gear on for run number 2 here for the men. This is the 3rd.
6.98 already, faster than his first start.
And that would have been a 3rd place start time in the first run.
Taking the results, we lost
The one positive thing is he's got the best ice of anyone in the field right now.
He
Fresh
does.
spritz.
He has the best ice, and I think we're going to see him move up. Hopefully, you know, he still has the rest of his run to go, but a few spots. Nice and early to curve 12. Nice and smooth into curve 13. Still a little high on the end, and that's where we saw a lot of athletes struggle the first run.
Summer's teammate looking for a redemption run here as he sets the pace through and down. 50.20. That still would have been a top 20 on
Yeah,
the first run.
Would have put him in 20th place, so I don't know if we have a slower track this second run or if Johnny just doesn't have the speed, but he definitely had a better run than his first run.
Yeah, I was thrown off by the ice temperature, saying that it was a little bit warmer than the first heat.
I think that might have been
Maybe
the air temperature.
Oh, I was looking at air. It's always funny to me when the ice temperature is listed above freezing.
Right. How does that happen?
Not that. Please.
Now it's up to Johnny to wait as the rest of the 29 sleds come down the track. Second off in the second heat, Andrei Menzi of the Ukraine. Another athlete that struggled in the track as well as the start on the first heat.
And he only has a 100th lead on Johnny. Very aggressive start, really going after it.
50.202, great start. Sub 7 at 6.986. Here is Ukrainian slider Andre.
He's already behind. Johnny has a very strong start, so he was able to make up that time right away.
Bells out and ready for that.
American Johnny Gustafsson looking to knock off as many athletes as possible and hang out in that leader's box. Manzi is 2/10 back now. So Johnny will be holding for at least another heat.
A little early to curve 13. Late to curve 16, catches that pressure and comes
Is
out
that
nice
his head
and
on the
clean.
ice? That little skin? You hear that sound in skeleton. It's usually a face on the ice.
It might have been his feet. With our neck straps, you can see he's wearing there to support his head when he hits those high pressure curves. You still lose your head and it's a big strain on your muscles and very physically challenging, but typically it'll be enough to hold your head off the ice. It depends on how tight an athlete wears their neck strap. But
Is it pretty standard? Does everybody wear a neck strap?
I think almost everybody does. For a while,
Doesn't seem worth the risk.
a lot of the guys wouldn't wear them because they thought it made them more macho to not need the help. But you can just relax your muscles when you have that support, which is going to lead to cleaner, faster runs. Yeah, if you're not flexing everything up top,
an advantage.
If you can have
relax.
a smoother run. So all the guys eventually came around. But for a while, it was
when you see someone doing well with it, then you realize, okay,
maybe
no
I
one
should try
can even
that.
tell anyway.
Yeah.
Winning is cooler. The young Colton and Dean Clark from Canada dropping in.
To the men's loose start, Manzi into second with a 50.607. Here we go, Canada. This is Colton Clark.
Already 1200s back at the pace set by American Johnny Gustafsson.
Yeah, he's definitely going to need to improve his start times. He's relatively young. I think we said this is his first World Cup, so he has the time to make that improvement. But if he wants to be competitive at this level, he's going to need to put together a faster start. Already 2/10 back, going here, 11 to 12. Pretty late curve 12. You can see him fighting to get it over.
1800s back. What was cool about this race is seeing extra Canadians entered into the field. Usually that's only something you see on German tracks.
Right. Yeah, they definitely took advantage of racing at home, put as many athletes in as they could.
Colton Clark slides into second place. Just 3 sleds down of a 30 sled field here in the second heat. It'll be interesting to see if athletes have more controlled runs. We certainly know that Chris Masder planned on tightening things up a bit.
He let us know.
Yeah.
Well, this ice is faster than what any of the athletes saw in training, but now they have one run of experience on it. And just that one run, just that first race run of knowing how your sled's going to react on this harder, faster ice helps you going into the second run, and now they know what to expect.
It's just that constant game that you're playing. Russia's Alexander Gorbatsevich.
He had a pretty rough first run. He, I think, nearly crashed in curve 13, 14.
He was 27th after the first heat. Another athlete looking for a redemption run.
Start. Great run there for Canada's Colton Clark in the second place handily with a 50.430.
Is this normal for Gorbatsevich to be peaking up and down like that constantly, or is that something maybe he's trying to get settled in his sled?
I haven't watched him slide too much, but I would say that when I see an athlete doing that they're trying to fight for that good position. They want to have their head back, but they're just not totally confident in doing that. So each time he gets a little nervous and he wants to look, see where he's going, he's going to peek his head up, but then want that aerodynamic, that good position, he's going to put it back.
He's got just over a 1/10 of a second to work with over the current leader, and he is gaining time, nearly 2/10 now, headed into the finish curve. stretching out just over a quarter of a second. Your new leader, Alexander Gorbatsevich from Russia.
And I think we'll see possibly Gorbatsevich move up a few more spots. He had some pretty major mistakes in the first run, not similar mistakes to Johnny, but they both had some pretty major mistakes. He went about 4.5 tenths faster on his second run than his first run.
And for some athletes, that kind of redemption, can be enough fuel. But I imagine in the Russian program, when it's really excellence or nothing, that's a tough position to be in.
The track is clear for Anton Dukash from men's start.
Anton Dukach of the Ukraine on the handles. Our 5th sled in the second heat.
And Anton only has currently an 8,000th lead on Gorbatsevich.
And Luge in track, Jakub Simonak to the men's start. Gorbatsevich, full gas there.
Anton was disqualified from the Lake Placid race, but finished 27th in Innsbruck.
And right now he's sitting in 26th place, so he's probably hoping to either hold on to his spot or move up a bit. You never want to drop back on the second run, but unfortunately it happens. He's already a 10th and a half behind the pace.
Summer, do you know if the funding for these smaller nations in luge, is it government funding, or do they battle to find personal sponsors in order to do this?
I'm not sure. I think it probably varies from country to country. I know a lot of other nations, their sports are funded by their government. They're nationally funded. In the USA, we're one of the only countries not funded by our government.
Half a second back for Anton Dukach. He falls to 4th place.
But it doesn't look like they have a ton of sponsors, so I'm guessing some funding from their government. I don't know. I think it probably varies.
It's definitely a unique model that the U.S. has. Lots of potential for huge sponsors. I believe that model changed at the '84 Olympics and changed it for the IOC as well. Selling exclusive sponsorship.
That's right. All of the, what is it, Rule 40? Yep.
Summer Britcher is referencing Rule 40, a current rule up for debate as athletes look to have power over their own likeness at the Olympics and be able to market themselves.
What a crazy concept.
Jakub Simonak on the handles. And I think most people don't know that there is a blackout period during the Olympic Games where athletes aren't allowed to mention personal sponsors or use the rings or use certain terms that are under control.
That's right. There's a lot of specifics about sponsorships and advertising and campaigns going into the Olympics during the Olympics for athletes. There's interview rights that come into play with first interviews after events. There's all sorts of rules.
And recently the IOC told the different National Olympic Committees that it was up to them to decide how they wanted to approach Rule 40. So the U.S. did just release that for the athletes. You'll have more control and a bit more flexibility coming into the next Olympics into 2020 and 2022.
I think that's a really good thing. Hopefully we'll see some positive impact from that.
4th place for Jakub Simonak. Alexander Gorbatsevich, as you predicted, Summer, still in the lead. Yeah, the interesting thing will to be if they're able to prove that both athletes and sponsors and NOCs can profit from sharing a bit of that. Ooh, early on to 13, that line that we've seen all night long.
And Jakub had a fairly consistent times here. I don't remember the specifics of his first run as far as those mistakes were, but he was within about 100th of his first run time.
At the top, the young Italian, Lucas Guffler, who held the lead for quite a while in the first heat.
He did. He's Start bib number 1. He was the first one down the track, the first run. He held that spot for a while. But he has a pretty slow start, and he really needs to improve on that to get into a more competitive spot.
Just 20 years old. Oh, he's got some training to do. Double loop there in corner 3 is going to hurt. He'll be dropping spots.
But he did have, that was 1,000th faster than his first start time, so he had a slow start in the first run, was able to make up a good amount of spots. So hopefully he'll be able to stop the bleeding. That's what we call it when you're losing time the whole way down the track. Stop the bleeding, keep the time the same, and maybe lower that gap.
Gap is expanding, 36 hundredths between Guffler and Gorbatsevich right now as he heads into the Gold Rush Trail.
Late to curve 16, that's going to cost him some more time.
Lucas Guffler throwing down 6th place, over a half of a second behind the current leader, Alexander Gorbatsevich. Summer, I'll be curious to see if different teams approach their development differently after seeing what the Austrian team has been able to do. Because typically everyone just holds the Germans in this high standard. They've got all these options. The kids are starting in droves at young ages. But Austria is really coming out to show that that a different approach is yielding great results, and you're seeing a lot of different athletes.
Yeah, I think the Austrians take that approach. The Russians and the Germans have done this where they have more than the 5 athletes that can compete in a men's World Cup, and they, instead of saying, hey, you didn't make the team, sorry, try again next year, they actually bring them to World Cups. They let them fight off week to week for a spot, and I think it really plays to their advantage because you have that depth of field. I mean, otherwise, if all your athletes retire at the same time, what are you left with?
And that competition, that level of competition does breed excellence.
Exactly. My friend of mine has a quote I really like. It's high tide raises all ships. So if your team is doing well, you're going to do better. It benefits everyone to work together and fight for those results together.
And that's something Tristan Walker was saying earlier in the women's race, is just being more transparency, sharing information raises everyone's level. It's easy in these sliding sports to think that there's some secret, that there's some special thing, some magic potion that you're missing that someone else has.
But it is a very, I mean, that could be the case a lot of times. I mean.
And sometimes it is a secret
Sometimes
potion.
it is a secret.
Rix Rositas a quarter of a second back of Gorbatsevich as he skids his way across the finish line. 28 hundredths, that's 3rd place for Rix Rositas of Latvia.
But technology is such a huge part of our sport, and so every nation is keeping their tech secret. They don't want others to find out what, even the simple things of what angle your steels are on, what's the parallel, which is actually from the back of the sled to the front of the sled, how parallel they are. I mean, if you have a heavy sled or a light sled and those are just basic things. Those aren't even like technology secrets, but they're still things we want to keep secret.
Do you find that oftentimes it comes down to the individual, how the individual reacts with those changes, or is there some magic thing that has, say, you guys have made a change on the U.S. team and then suddenly everybody is going faster?
I think it's both. I think there's definitely different sliding styles that people have. Even on the same teams, you can see certain athletes slide with a different technique and a different style. So a different setup is going to affect them differently, and it's not one size fits all.
At the top of the hill, Maxim Arevin of Russia looking to chase down teammate Alexander Gorbatsevich, who's still in the lead. Johnny Gustafson of the U.S. has been in 2nd place for quite a while as well.
He's drafting.
Drafting
off of Gorbatsevich to move up on that leader's box. It's a shame that, Johnny's not also there. He loves being in the leader's box. He loves riding the elevator because he loves, he loves it.
At what point is it appropriate to have the 3 people in the leader's box? Is it the top 10, top 7, top 6?
top 50.
I think it's whenever
Someone won't go away.
Yeah.
Whenever someone won't leave is when you start have to pushing them out. Once
I think
been
it depends on how
pitched
close
out.
the times are, but typically around top 6, people start staying.
Revin, the first to knock off
8
Alexander Gorbatsevich by just 0.08 of a second.
Wow.
Wasn't even the fastest run of the second heat, but it was fast enough to take over the leader.
Very close. And that's why this sport is so interesting. There's no other sport timed to the 1,000th of a second. I've seen athletes miss the podium by 2,000ths of a second. And it's heartbreaking, but it's exciting, and that's why we're all hooked. That's why we're all still here.
Everyone chasing the perfect run like the perfect wave. Summer, I've been wondering if booty evolution. the booties this year seem to have changed, or maybe I just didn't notice last year. You're seeing a lot more black booties. Is there different companies now making luge booties?
Right, so the contract with Adidas ran out, so we used to have different race booties, so now it's a company GTS that builds our race booties. That began last season after the Olympics, so they're a little different for sure, a little heavier. The fit is a little different, and
the track is Italy's Kevin Fischneller, who struggled in the first heat. I mean, that is definitely, even a little bit heavier shoe is going to change the feel, especially when you guys have been sliding as long as you have.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an adjustment. The thing is that everyone's sliding on them, so everyone's dealing with the same adjustments, same changes. But previously, we had training booties that were lighter or heavier than our race booties, so you'd almost shift and feel better. But now these are heavier than our previous training booties.
143.9 kilometers an hour top speed for Kevin Fischneller, who takes over the lead by just over 1/10 of a second. All smiles, as that time was just over 1/10 ahead of his first run down time. Fischneller is currently 10th overall. An athlete that is always just in the mix.
He's definitely been in a competitive spot for a long time, just not quite getting the results, but he's there, he's consistent. Nice 15-16 transition. He's right parallel with the left wall there from one curve into another, almost making it smooth, as much of making it as one curve as you can.
And like the current overall leader, Jonas Mueller, Kevin is looking for that breakout season, trying to find that difference between what it's going to take for him to really flourish in the sport, like his cousin, Dominic. On the handles, hometown hero, Canada's Reed Watts.
Into first with a 50.116. Canada, this is our very own Reed Watts. Let's put our
Reed is currently in 20th. He's looking to bounce up in the standings and hopefully get into that Sprint Cup tomorrow. Oh, but he's already behind Fischneller.
He's behind, but he looks so good on the sled. He's got nearly perfect position, looks very relaxed, super smooth. 400s behind already.
This is where the home track advantage comes in. The ability to relax where others tense up. Waving through Shiver, Watts makes his way through the Gold Rush Trail. One of the better lines we've seen down here at the bottom of the track. Smooth entry into corner 16. Can he overtake Kevin Fischneller? Laying back, but no. 4th place for Reed Watts as he drops even further. 1,300s back behind Kevin Fischneller, followed by Maxim Revin and Alexander Gorbatsevich, your current top 3.
And that's tough. You always want to do well on your home track more than anywhere else, but that's just some added pressure that sometimes can make the difference. I mean, it's nice to have a home track advantage, but you're dealing with a lot of other stress. You're dealing with your family there watching, you know, the expectations, everything. He looks super calm on the sled. Nice 11-12 transition.
And as we mentioned before, it is a skill racing on a home
Beautiful.
track when you've got, so much support can be overwhelming if you're not used to it. If you're used to traveling the world alone and doing your thing, it's nice to have that support, and you just have to learn how to manage it and manage your anxiety and the pressure of wanting to perform in front of loved ones.
Absolutely.
Germany's Max Langenhahn.
To the men's illusion start. Downtime for Watts, 50.259. In fourth position.
Already has over a 10th and a half.
He's currently 9th overall.
Sub-7.
His best finish this season was 9th place in Lake Placid.
9-8. Great start.
2/10 to work with now. We are likely going to see a new leader, potentially one that holds strong for quite some time.
Very level line in curve 11. We're sent him a little late into curve 12. Smooth into 13 though, where we've seen a lot of mistakes. He's having a very nice run, but he's losing his lead. He's down to just about 1.5 tenths.
142.5 kilometers an hour. He tucks back 14 hundredths ahead of the pace. Max Langenhahn, your new leader. And Summer, something you were saying on the break is it's interesting in this race, the time discrepancy. Usually luge is decided by thousandths of a second, and you were saying it's interesting that you've got, 7, 10, hundredths, a tenth, all between the top athletes.
That's right, and this is a track that's known for having a lot of athletes in a tight cluster with not that much time between them. But we've seen today actually a bit of bigger gaps than normal. But for example, the top 6 athletes are all within 800ths of each other. 800ths of a second, separating 6th place from first right now. I mean, really anything could happen in this second run.
Earlier today, Tatiana Ivanova, the Women's World Cup winner, here to support her teammates. Germany's Moritz Bollmann on the handles.
And this is where we see that tight racing. He's just got just over 200ths ahead of his teammate.
Langenhahn burning the bridge on the way down, 50.030.
And he's already lost it with a slower start time. He's almost 200ths behind, but that's just the start of the track. There's a lot of curves left for him to make that up and regain his lead.
You would think that slower starters would get weeded out of the German program because they have so many athletes to choose from, but I guess that's where the skill of luge comes in.
Well, I think slower starters later in their career might get weeded out more, but he's fairly young. He might have a competitive start.
Right. Just 19
level.
years old, he still has a lot of man strength in the game.
And he had a 13th place start the first run, which is that's competitive enough to be in the mix.
Just 700ths separates Bollmann from teammate Max Langenhahn, who he falls behind in second place. That's a great point, Summer. I imagine that the nice thing about luge is for everyone, you can be increasing strength here throughout most of your career.
Definitely, as long as you just are smart with recovery and
keep healthy
realizing
shoulders.
when you're getting older.
I was wondering how often hand injuries play a role. Because I know shoulder surgeries are a very common luge injury.
Yeah, I haven't heard of too many direct hand injuries. I think the bigger thing is if you hurt your hand doing something else, it really impacts your ability to have a fast start. That's what I've seen more frequently.
That's kind of the way it goes, right? In sliding sports, it's not typically injuries on the ice, but off the ice that gets in the way.
Or on the ice, but not on the ice. One year I rolled my ankle getting onto the start, and that was an embarrassing one. So Wolfie here is sitting in 17th place right now, and his goal has got to be to just move up 2 spots and get into the Sprint Cup for tomorrow.
If Wolfgang Kindl is going to maintain that 7th place overall ranking, he needs to not only hold his position, but climb 2 spots ahead of Chris Masder coming up.
And we saw him go very late in the run on the first run, and he had some unexplained time loss that I wonder if it was track conditions or setup. So it'll be interesting to see what he does now. And he's losing time at a slower rate than he was his first run, definitely. He's a tenth and a half back. A little late to curve 12. Nice smooth entrance to 13.
Gaining a little bit of time. Is there enough track? As he goes late into curve 16, 143.7 kilometers an hour. Oh, 800s, third place for Kindle.
He did make some time up, but not enough.
That's a current 20th place, if everything lines up the same from the first heat for Wolfgang Kindle. A bit baffling for someone that we've seen have so much success.
And he looks a little confused. He doesn't know, but
this is kind of the year of the shakeup.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the Austrian team really strengthened their team. They have so many strong athletes, but I have to wonder how that affects Kindle mentally. He was used to being the top dog, the best Austrian, and now that they have this depth of field, this strong program, kind of changes your role a little bit.
And as strong as we all know these athletes are, it does play. It plays into your mind if you're not getting the same kind of support. Athletes still want their coaches to believe in them, and if you're seeing success around you, you know it's a good thing, but it can be difficult to then manage your own sports psychology.
Absolutely. I mean, this sport is so mental. We have, with only 5 training runs before the race, that's just about 5 minutes of actual on-ice training before we compete in the World Cup. So you have to have it together.
And especially after the 21 years that Kindle's already been sliding. In the right now, Mateusz Sokowicz of Poland.
He's having a really nice season. I mean, looks so good on the sled, so smooth. Little almost too early there, it looks like.
How long has Poland been partnered up with Germany?
I'm not sure.
I'm curious if this is a partnership that is now really starting to pay off for that Polish team. Oh, high on the end of curve
That's
11.
okay, though, because you want to get early to curve 12. So as long as you don't panic and you just let that height send you over early to curve 12. Late to curve 16, high there.
Well managed by Poland's Sokowicz, but he drops to 8th position. Max Langenhahn of Germany still in the lead, followed by his teammates, Moritz Bowman. So Wolfgang Kindle bumps up 1 spot.
He needs 1 more to make it into the Sprint Cup.
And your teammate, Johnny Gustafsson, jumped 6 spots there after his first heat.
Which, with
7.
a mistake like his in the first run, I mean, that's all you can hope for. At that point, you're just trying to, when you've taken yourself out of the race that much, you're just trying to end it on a high note. You just want to leave the track with a positive run you can be confident of.
15 sleds remain here in the second heat of men's singles luge. We are back at the top with Chris Mazder of the USA.
Joseph Ninnis to the men's start, just over halfway through the field. This is 16 out of 30. Fastest 15 racers.
7.008 start. It's 100th, just 1,000 slower than his first run.
And he's already behind. He didn't have that much of a lead on Langenhahn.
We know that his equipment is tighter.
He let us know the first run.
It's all about transparency as the FIL athlete representative.
He
walks the walk, talks the talk, walks the walk. But he's a 10th back.
125.
Nice transition into 13. He's really laying it back. He's closing the gap. Will it be enough?
There's not enough track for Chris Mazder at 142.4 kilometers an hour. The Olympic silver medalist. Oh, threw him down, drops 1 position behind Max Langenhahn of Germany.
So currently, if everyone comes down ahead of Chris, he will be out of the Sprint Cup. So he's really hoping that
Chris needs to pass 1 person.
1 person comes down behind him, and he'll be in the sprint race tomorrow, which counts for full World Cup points. And you do not want to miss.
Thanks for coming out and having a beer for me.
A little rough onto curve 10 there.
Got it.
Now Chris Mazur waits
Ooh, yeah.
as 14
Really late.
sleds
Anyways.
remain.
See you on there.
Back to the top for Josef Ninis of Slovakia. Undoubtedly being cheered on by the rest of the crew. I know this is someone you mentioned, Summer, that typically has a better shot at the Sprint Cup if he can get into it.
That's right, and he is a really talented slider. He just doesn't have a very fast start, and we see that cost him.
Josef Ninis has been sliding for 29 years. He's 38 years old.
So we see he's already dropped back 700s just from his start when he had a lead. So we'll see if there's enough track for him to make it up and stay in that top 15.
As one of the larger, more experienced athletes, and this is known as a bottom gainer, the question is there enough track here in Whistler now that the men's start goes off of the old Olympic Damen start?
He's already lost over 2 tenths,
Oh,
so
he's bleeding.
he's losing time. Something's not quite right this run. He really threw it down the first run.
Through the Gold Rush Trail, 2 tenths behind the pace set by Max Langenhahn. Chris Mazur is going to jump back into the sprint race tomorrow. Ninis, oh, 6th place.
He did make up some time, though, in the bottom there. He was over 2 tenths behind and finished only 0.16 behind. So he made up some of that time. Maybe if the track was just a few curves longer, it would have been enough.
But unfortunately, we are not likely to see him in the sprint race tomorrow, which would have been fun. Sprint race, of course, takes the start time mostly out of the equation, as it's a flying start. And that is Ninis' big disadvantage there. Max Langenhahn of Germany has been spending some time in the leader's box, but now he looks to the top to watch teammate Sebastian Bley.
Jonas Mueller to the men's start.
Sebastian Bley is currently in 13th place after the first heat.
300th lead after the start of the second run.
He had a great season opener with an 8th place finish in Eagles.
He looks very calm on the sled, but he's losing time. And it's interesting when you see he's already 500s back. It's interesting when you see someone on the same team losing time like this with a good run to his teammate.
Right, because you would assume that setups would be quite similar.
Well, then that's the question of transparency.
Right.
I mean,
143 kilometers an hour.
Open
oh,
skid
big
before
skid
the
through the
finish
finish.
line.
That opens up to nearly 1500s back. Sebastian Bley in 6th position. So Chris Mazur bumps up another position, still in 2nd place behind Max Langenhahn. In 3rd place, Moritz Bollmann of Germany. So Wolfgang Kindl does have a shot at that top 15.
Yeah, he still might sneak in there.
Summer, as a tactic on the start, sometimes you see athletes' hands are hovering above for a bit. Are you trying to keep your hands, is it about contact on the ice over frequency? Like, do you want a long
That's
contact?
a big debate, actually. Some people think that more paddles at a high speed are better, and some people think that long and strong is better. There's a few different start techniques that vary, and it's kind of a point of pride. You know, everyone thinks their technique's the best, so when, but different athletes go fast with different techniques, and it really comes down to just each individual person and what works for them.
Sebastian Bley down with a 50.234.
The current World Cup leader, Johannes Müller of Austria, in the track. 7.02 start.
So far this year, he'd be hoping to make a hat-trick. 7.22 is the start.
I would imagine it's a lot like sprinting, where there's actually less power. If you hang out with your hand behind you, you're gaining less speed than if you can get your hand back out and grabbing the ice again.
Absolutely. We're just sprinting with our hands.
Guerrilla sprints. Johannes Mueller still ahead of Max Langenhahn of Germany. Late into 16,
Late into 16, hits the woods.
144.3 kilometers an hour.
Wow.
Johannes Mueller maintains that lead
not
in the
enough
most
to cost
frightening
him.
of ways. 7,000ths of a second.
He knows he could have moved up if he had not made that mistake. I mean, we saw him hit the woods. That's where you hit the actual top part of the curve and then come down, nearly hit the inside wall, and he really caught it on that second pressure. But wow, what a mistake to make in the last curve.
That's where you see 17 years experience come out and not panicking, but a brutal finish.
So late in, see him hits up top, nearly hits the bottom, and really catches it with a hard steer with his left leg to try to minimize the damage. But I mean, he is lucky to come down in first place, but he's not thinking that. He's thinking how he could have moved up a few spots and had a better result.
And what a demonstration of the amount of G-force, the amount of pressure in curve 16, especially if you go in late. You're seeing what naturally happens to a sled.
Absolutely. And it's just, as hard as you steer when you go in that late, it's too much sometimes to catch.
American Tucker West on the handles, currently in 11th place.
Wow, Mueller hit the gas there, 50.146. We know he's
After
no
2
stranger
silver
to
medals
this
in Lake Placid, Tucker is currently 4th place overall.
Tucker West, he's sitting in second.
He has a decent shot at maintaining this lead considering the last run by Mueller.
That's right. He's having a pretty good run here. He looks very calm. It's very important. This is a very high-speed track, but it's not known for being a very difficult track. So that's why we see a lot of athletes looking more relaxed. A little late there, but he handled it nicely.
Tucker losing time, 200s back now.
Late 16, but he really caught that pressure. And he's in the green.
Oh, gains it back by 0.06 of a second. Tucker West, your new leader, can now do no worse than 11th place.
And we saw that. That was what Jonas's mistake cost him. Tucker went in a little late to 16, but he really caught that pressure with a steer. He was able to keep a level line. And we saw Jonas make huge mistakes in the last curve.
And Summer, wouldn't it be programmed into your body? You go in late to 16, you hammer a steer. So I wonder what happened to Mueller there.
Sometimes it's just a lost battle, and if you steer almost too soon, you might make it worse. You might just push the pressure up higher.
Great save there by Tucker West.
We'll see.
Yes.
Best runs, but take it.
Tucker West will take it. 10 sleds remain here in the second heat of men's singles in Whistler, British Columbia. At the top of the track, Latvia's Ines Kavlenieks. One of 2 Latvians in the top 10 here.
Men's start. Wow, look at that run by West. Just heard from my colleague Mark over there. Not much to talk about.
Already 200s behind Tucker.
Turbos in first place. 1.96 his run. Here we go, the Latvian. This is Ines Kavlenieks, 7:02 start. 13.
But he's closing the gap down to 7,000ths of a difference in the green.
Moves into the lead.
Ines is one of the older athletes in the field at 33. He's been sliding for 17 years.
Nice entrance to curve 11.
These beautiful
Nice
safe lines have him in the green ahead of Tucker West.
He bumped a little bit onto 13 there. And the height on the end, like we saw a lot of athletes make the first run. Nice 15-16 though, so this is going to be close.
They come down to the finish. Ines Kavlenieks through and down behind Tucker West, drops to 2nd place, just ahead of Austria's Johannes Mueller in 3rd.
We saw he lost that time in curve 13. He was just a little too early, and then it dropped him in the belly of the curve and had that height on the end, and that's just not the line to take when you're trying to have a fast time, which typically you're trying to have a fast time.
American Tucker West can now do no worse than 10th.
And then high on the end, and that's where he lost it.
Is there any way to recover immediately from that bump there in turn 13, or do you have to?
I think it's a minimizing. You can make the exit smooth, but if you do bump and it sends you down in the middle, there's only up to go from there. The curve doesn't run out in time, and you have to come up on the exit.
Turn a 1 pressure corner into a 2 pressure corner. Speaking of pressure, Reinhard Egger of Austria at the top.
To the men's starts. All right,
Reinhard was one of the athletes that had to qualify through Nations Cup.
7:02 was the start. 7:04 start here for Austrian Reinhard.
He's a little bit slower on the start this second run, just about 100 slower than his first run.
140.156.
Keep an eye on the color of the clock. It's going to indicate where he falls, behind or ahead of West. Currently behind. Oh,
Ahead.
gaining time though.
A little late to curve 10.
0.06 of a second. This could all be decided by corner 13.
Wow, turbo boost.
Smooth entrance, nice.
That's the safe line that we have not seen all that often tonight. Reinhard Egger will be your new leader by 0.07 of a second, knocking Tucker West off the top of the podium.
A little late there to curve 10. We saw him close to that left wall, but a nice entrance to curve 11. This is a long curve, a lot of drops, so people build up a lot of speed in curve 11. You're going a lot faster on the exit than you are on the entrance out of just one curve.
The best demonstration is if you have to get from the exit of 11 to the top quickly and you sprint up, then you're like, okay, this is a steep, steep drop.
Right.
Check 25, Tim, please.
Claire Del Negro of the FIL. The Vice President of Sports.
See the exact same little foot tap as the first run of Christers.
The last Latvian of the evening, Christers Apriots. Hugging that right wall
Boom, up into first place.
as he tries to get settled going into corner 3. He's got 500s to work with ahead of teammate,
Don't forget to stick around once we're
or excuse me, ahead of Austrian Reinhard Egger.
Up on the finish dock, fireworks, it's all going off here in Whistler. First interval time, coming up 21.213.
It's got nearly 400s in a second.
We expect to see this lead change hands a couple more times before we're done here tonight.
Summer, how tempting is it to steer through that straightaway?
Well, it's a lot different for the men and the women, that straightaway there, because
Oh, right.
and it's actually not a straightaway. It's technically curve 8, so it's a near straightaway, which makes it a little challenging to get around the bend.
Apriots is falling behind Egger. Question is how far? One position. Second place for Latvia's Christers Apriots. Reinhard Egger is still your leader. So now Egger can do no worse than 8th place.
A lot of height on the end of the curve 13 there, which sent him not ideally into curve 14. High on the end, late to 15, and then little late to 16. So nothing major, but those little
Micro
mistakes
errors add up at this level. A lot of talent here to come as we close out the second heat of men's singles. On the handles, Italy's Dominic Fischnaller.
Okay, poke tight.
And this is where things get interesting. Dominic is in 7th place right now, but he's just over 1/10 of a second to first. That's how tight this racing is.
He's chasing down brothers Gleicher, Nico and David.
First place here in Whistler.
We're in 5th and 6th right now.
Reinhard Egger sitting up there on top of the pile here so far though, 7:01. 2, 4, 6,
Quite the lead, 1400s ahead of Reinhard Egger.
left to close to time.
Right now, it could still be more indicative of his first run than how well he's managing the second heat.
That's right. His first run and his competitive start time. Oof. He had a little bit of height on 11, and it could have sent him nice into 12, but instead we saw him fall back on that left shoulder and a little late.
Expanding, Dominic Fischneller is going for a top 6 here as he tries to climb. Oh, he does.
Wow.
The cross-country ski lunge to cross and take the lead, nearly 2/10 ahead of Reinhard Egger. Dominic Fischneller, the current man to beat.
Nice transition, 15 to 16. He has that nice, catches the first pressure in 16. Smooth exit, and yeah, his feet split to try to make sure he hits that laser.
Every 100th counts here when you're looking for a top 6. Back to the top for Austria's Nico Gleicher.
Track is clear for Nico Gleicher from NASCAR.
Summer, do you slide with a mouth guard?
I do not. I used to. And then I forgot it one year.
Like a binky, and then you realize
Yeah,
you
and then
didn't need it.
oh man, I guess, you know, if you're in Europe and you don't have it, what are you going to do, not race?
David Gleicher to the men's luge start.
So Nico is only
absolutely no
1/100th of a second behind his brother David right now.
And currently 400ths in the lead, Dominic Fischneller.
Here today, 6:99. Great start for Nico.
He's expanding that lead. He's up to 700ths ahead.
6.
We're down to 500ths.
925 for 100.
Gleicher losing speed as he comes into the Gold Rush Trail. Oh no, tries to skip curve 13. He needs to get it back by 16. Oh.
Smokes, what a ride there for the Austrian.
Nico Gleicher hangs on. 1.2 seconds back. That drops him to 25th position. He goes from a 6th place all the way back to 25th.
That's always challenging. He knew he had a chance to really do well there, and huge mistake in curve 13 that just he couldn't get back under control until the finish.
Immensely
We
frustrating.
see him skid going in and catches on the exit on one runner going into 14.
Did he steer away?
So high. Well, he was skidding, and he was going to hit before 14, I think, so he was probably trying to avoid hitting, which sent him into a second skid in 14.
Well saved. That could have been very painful, but still
It's
incredibly
emotionally
frustrating
painful.
for the
But
athlete
he-
that finished 4th in the season opener.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Hopefully his brother David did not see that run on any of the cameras. Only 5 sleds remain here in the second heat of men's singles. In 5th place currently, Olympic champion David Gleicher.
Down near the bottom of the track there, it was all looking so good and then disintegrated. We are now in 25th position. This is it. This is our brother David. We'll see what he can do. 7:03 is the start. 2 100s up towards the first interval now. Into the final 5 sliders here for the next competition.
Not gaining any
Gleicher
time,
just
not losing
100th
too much.
ahead.
163 down through corner 6. Dead even here with half a go. This is close.
2,000th lead going into curve 11. He's going to have to nail the bottom half of the track. But he's a little late to 12.
Already falling behind Fischneller with that bobble we've seen all night to 13. Oh,
Beautiful. I thought that was going to be a little rough.
he
there, but
cranked it out of 15.
Beautiful 15, 16. Oh, but just
Still
not enough.
not good enough for first place. Dominic Fischneller now climbs into no worse than a 5th place finish. David Gleicher, no worse than 6th.
Little bump there, little high on the end. And that's the same spot we saw his brother have enormous mistakes. So David was able to make it through with just minimal mistakes, but it still cost him the lead.
Summer, is there a monitor up there right by the start? Can you tell what's going on, or is it fairly well sheltered?
Typically there's one just like 10 feet away where the coaches can watch, but not in view of the athletes.
So you're hearing the sound effects, but not seeing.
You're hearing the reactions and you're seeing the clock. So you don't know what happened, but you know something goes wrong when someone loses over a second.
The second of 2 remaining Russians on the handles. Semen Pavlichenko.
Block to the men's start. Glirshar into first. First is first, no matter how you cut it. 50.083. That run down.
6.98 start. Nearly identical to his first run.
It's a very fast start time.
Current start record is 6.93, held by Johannes Ludwig, who is leading the race. Pavlichenko is currently 5th overall in the World Cup standings, and this would certainly help. He's having a great season.
He's built it up to a 700th lead.
Oh no, big skid into 13!
Big skid into 13. Wow, and he's gonna drop.
Just like Nico Gleischer.
He's not gonna drop quite that much, but he is gonna.
Down to 9th.
The good thing is,
well managed.
I mean, that's heartbreaking, but he's still in the sprint race tomorrow. I think what he saw was he was gonna go early to curve 13. Like we've seen so many athletes bump on that entrance, and he tried to avoid that by rolling back onto his right shoulder. But it sent him late and into a skid right here.
He misses the whole corner.
The whole corner, and there's nowhere to go but up. Oh, I mean, but you see his skill in the way that he is already back online.
Amazing.
By the end of curve 14, he's already perfect again.
And there is something to be said for being able to relax immediately. And his 19 years experience certainly helps. Speaking of experience, 3-time gold medalist, an Olympic champion, Felix Locke, 30 years old, has been sliding for 25 years.
Felix is sitting in 3rd place right now with 2 sleds to go. And he has not podiumed yet this year. It's a weird spot for him to be in.
He's been having an uncharacteristic season. Everyone is questioning the fall of the great Felix Locke.
Nothing good happening there, but here comes Felix.
It's already, the clock is green. We'll see how much on this next split.
His best finish so far was 6th.
800s almost.
Locke maintaining that lead into curve 9.
Not gaining, not losing.
Through Shiver and into the Gold Rush Trail. Beautiful.
He's losing though.
143.7 kilometers an hour. Felix Locke guarantees himself a bronze medal by just 0.02 of a second, just edging out Dominic Fischnaller.
So we know he's got a medal. There's still 2 sleds to go.
Dominic went from a 7th to a no worse than 4th. Still to come, Roman Repelov of Russia and Johannes Ludwig of Germany. Really
just breaks out right before the finish line.
Norbert Locke, excited about his son's first podium of the season. It's got to be nice seeing a German flag racing overseas. Here we have it. The last 2 sleds. Currently in 2nd place, Russia's Roman Repelov. Time to beat. One minute, 39 seconds, 0.86.
The men's start. Here we go. This is for all the money. This is the fastest of 2 sleds of the first run.
He already has a 700th lead after the start.
He's having an incredible season. And momentum certainly carries you.
I mean, he really came onto the World Cup Tour with a bang.
He did.
His first year, he just did amazing, and he's been a top athlete ever since.
Star record 21.064 first interval. 5 100s up at the second interval.
Repelov has 500s to work with. Headed down Shiver. Gold Rush Trail is what has decided this race.
Nice exit of 13.
Gaining time, 700s.
Nice transition, 15-16, very smooth.
Your new leader will be Roman Repelov of Russia by 14 hundredths of a second over Felix Lok. We haven't seen many flawless runs here tonight, and Roman's was certainly close.
It was. He's a very talented athlete, and he went 400ths faster than his first run, and the gap between Roman and Johannes is only 200ths, close to 300ths. So Johannes is sitting at the start. He knows he's got to be near perfect to hold on to his lead.
The last sled of the night, Germany's Johannes Ludwig.
Okay.
Bronze and gold medalist from 2018, currently 13th overall. Explosive start, we would expect nothing less from the start record holder.
We'll see what he can do. He is the start record holder, 693.
A 9,000th lead after the first split.
We just saw an amazing run there by Repelov.
Perfect position.
Thousandths off of the track record. So close. That record is last year. Here we go, Repelov.
Oh, just 1,000th of a second between Repelov and Ludwig.
Do that. 21.089. It is first.
5,000 behind. Wow, this is close.
Losing time. The question is, how far will he fall back?
A little late to curve 12.
Really clean-looking run.
Late to 15. This will decide it. A little late to 16. It wasn't bad, but
Little mistakes are compounding. Ludwig is going to fall back. How far? 4 places.
wow.
And off the podium, Dominic Fischnaller held out hope. It is your bronze medalist, Johannes Ludwig, drops 2/10 behind.
wow, I did not expect that. He
Such
was
small
holding the
mistakes
whole
that
run,
really
and just
counted.
in that last little bit, it cost him.
The second win of the season for Russia's Roman Repelov. That would have been the first win of the season for Johannes Ludwig. He struggled. His best finish so far is in 11th place.
Well, now he's got a fourth. But it's very tough to fall when you're sitting in first.
And he has the redemption chance with the sprint race. We can feel the fireworks here in Whistler as you have the final results. In first place, Roman Repelov with the gold medal. In second place, Felix Lok's first medal of the winter. Dominic Fischnaller rounding out the top 3 with a bronze. Johannes Ludwig dropping back to 4th place. David Gleicher in 5th. And in 6th place, Reinhard Egger. Tucker West, the top American finisher, in 8th place. Chris Master finishing 13th, so he will make it into the sprint tomorrow. And American Johnny Gustafson, 23rd place. Reed Watts, hometown hero from Canada, 21st, so will not compete in the Sprint Cup tomorrow. His races are done here this weekend.
And there we have it, our podium for the Men's World Cup in Whistler.
The flowers ceremony. This was a surprisingly action-packed race. Summer, final thoughts?
It was very interesting. It was a close race. We had a lot of switch-ups in the second run, and a lot of athletes making big mistakes that I did not expect.
Snow is starting to fall. As we look at our World Cup standings, Roman Repelov in first. Jonas Muller drops to 2nd place with a tough race today. Dominic Fischnaller in 3rd. Tucker West still in 4th place. Felix Lok bumps up to 5th place. Simon Pavlichenko in 6th. And Chris Masder, 7th place. Reinhard Egger bumps up to 8th place with a great finish today. Johnny Gustafsson rounds out the top 15 there. Wolfgang Kindl still maintains a top 10 ranking